Good morning to everybody and welcome to our new episode of Itanong Mo kay Sir Pat. This is a very easy example. Contributing factors in choosing the track of grade 11 students, a case study. At the end part of the title, it is written that it is a case study. It is safe to assume that it is really a case study, not correlational, not experimental, not action research. Hypothesis testing is not possible, but let us still make it sure by looking into the questions in the statement of the problem. As we read the questions in the statement of the problem, we have one, what are the contributing factors in choosing the track of the grade 11 students? Number two, what are the reasons of grade 11 students in considering those contributing factors? Number three, what are the regrets of the grade 11 students in considering those factors in choosing their track? And finally, what are the suggestions of the students in addressing their regrets? As we are going to look at the questions one by one, for the question number one, once we are done identifying the contributing factors, we are done with our question number one. There's no comparison in here. There is no comparison that is needed or suggested in question number one. So there's no hypothesis testing for question number one. For question number two, we are asked to identify the reasons regarding those contributing factors. Again, for number two, there's no comparison. As long as we are done with the reasons, we are done with question number two. For question number three, we're asked to find the regrets or to determine the regrets. There's no comparison. And for the final or for the last question, we are asked to identify the suggestions from the students themselves. There is still no comparison going on here. So in any of these questions, in the statement of the problem of this given research title, we were not able to identify any comparison at all. Therefore, in the entirety of this research concept, there should be no hypothesis testing because hypothesis testing is not needed. So this time, let us have an example that could change the course of the wind. The title is read as the effectiveness of homeroom guidance program in improving the misbehavior of the students with less serious cases. Let me give you a life hack in research. For research titles that contain words such as effectiveness, improvement, enhancement, impact, relationship, comparing, increasing, modifying, and the like, it is a clear signal that hypothesis testing is needed. This is because that in the statement of the problem, there is surely one or two questions that compose comparisons or that propose comparisons. In this given example, the concentration lies on the misbehavior. But could you determine whether a misbehavior has been improved or not? Tendency is we are going to measure misbehavior before and after the administration of a treatment, which in this case is a home guidance program. There is a comparison that considers the element of time, that is comparing misbehavior before and after the administration of a treatment. Thus, hypothesis testing is expected in this kind of example. Another example is, how about this one? We have just mentioned a life hack in research that for research titles that contain such words as effectiveness, improvement, enhancement, impact, relationship, comparing, increasing, modifying, and the like, it is a clear signal that hypothesis testing is needed. In this given example, where the title is read as Solid Waste Management Practices of Students in Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Corazon C. Aquino High School, there obviously are no keywords such as effectiveness, improvement, enhancement, impact, relationship, comparing, increasing, modifying, and the like. But the title is clearly comparative by nature because the practices between Phase 1 and Phase 2 students have been compared. So this title must expectedly have hypothesis testing. You see, while these keywords are powerful cues in determining whether hypothesis testing is needed or not, they are not guarantee. They do not guarantee applicability in all cases. The researcher still needs to be keen enough, above all, in analyzing whether there are comparisons going on in the study or none. If there are, hypothesis testing must be there. There are two ways of writing hypothesis. The null hypothesis denoted by HO and the alternative hypothesis denoted by HA. The former is negatively stated hypothesis, while the latter is its positive counterpart. The null hypothesis usually begins with the phrase, there is no significant blah blah blah. I would like to emphasize that adverb no to signify negation in the statement. On the other hand, the alternative hypothesis usually begins with the phrase, there is a significant blah blah blah. In preparing a manuscript, we only usually use the null hypothesis version. It's never the two versions that are both used. On the other hand, there are two tests of hypothesis. It could either be a test of difference or a test of relationship. Well, there is a game changer thing going on here. It is very critical that the researcher should know whether comparisons are differences or relationships. Is it a big deal? It is definitely a big fat thunderous yes. Why? Because statistical treatment is affected. There are statistical treatments intended for testing the relationships only, and those for testing differences only. When diagnoses hit the table, there is no way that statistical procedures would ever be correct. Computations will be wrong, conclusions will be wrong, recommendations will be wrong, and your entire research manuscript would be a total piece of crap. And we do not like that. So be careful in analyzing whether a hypothesis should be a test of relationship or a test of difference. But how could we know if it should be a test of difference or of relationship? Usually, it is a comparison between or among groups of a common variable. Test of difference will be used. On the other hand, if it is a comparison between or among variables of a common group, test of relationship will be used. Let me repeat that for emphasis. Usually, if it is a comparison between or among groups of a common variable, there are two or more groups, and there is only one variable, test of difference will be used. On the other hand, if it is a comparison between or among variables, there are two or more variables going on here, and there is only one common group, test of relationship will be used. So let's practice. Assuming that we have here either groups or variables, and we are going to determine whether they are whether difference or relationship is the hypothesis that suits them. Number one, height and weight. Height is a variable, weight is a variable. And even if there is no common group stated here, we assume that we are trying to get the height of one group and the weight of the same group. In the educational sector, perhaps This could be applied whenever we are trying to measure the nutritional status of our students. Usually, it happens at the beginning or during the opening of classes. One section, one class, usually our advisory class, that is our common group. We have our height as variable A and weight as another variable. Therefore, this should clearly use test of relationship. Test of relationship. Remember that whenever comparing two or more variables of a common group, we use test of relationship. In this case, height is a variable, weight is a variable. The common group is that one section that is included in our study. So this must be the first item, must be a test of relationship. For number 2, grades in section A and section B. We have here grades. Grades is a variable. Section A is our first group. Section B is our second group. In this second item, we are comparing two groups. And they share common variable, that is their grades. Two or more groups, comparing two or more groups of a common variable. This must be a test of difference. So the second item should be a test of difference. Number 3, strength and power. Strength and power. This could possibly be encountered by researchers whose specializations lie in physical education. We're assuming that we measure the strength of our class and the power of that same class. Strength is a variable, power is a variable. Our common group could be the section or our students who are included in our data collection procedure. So since we are comparing two or more variables of a common group, this should need a test of relationship. But before we proceed further with our discussion, how would you know if it is a variable? How would you know if it is a group? Well, let me give you another life hack when it comes to research, particularly whenever we are determining whether it is a variable or a difference. Although this is not a rule that applies to all, no. This is only a technique that we could use so that we could be able to simplify our analysis whenever we are determining whether what we are talking about are variables or groups. If it is tangible or something that you could touch, usually that you could talk to, usually we are pertaining to groups. Example, students. Can you touch your students? Yes. Can you talk to your students? Yes. Therefore, they could be your groups. They could be your groups. On the other hand, if it is something that you cannot touch, if it is something that you cannot touch, that you cannot talk to, it's intangible, that probably is a variable. Say for example, for number 1, can you touch your height? No, you cannot touch your height. You can touch your head. You can touch the top of your head, but you cannot touch your height. Because height is something that only exists in our mind. Height is a measure. It is something that we measure. Same and true with your weight. Can you touch your weight? No. We only measure weight. Because weight is something that only exists in our mind. It's not tangible. Nobody can touch their weight. So height and weight should both be variables. Another, for number 2, grades. Can you touch your grades? No. You cannot touch your grades. Perhaps you could touch the ink or the paper where your grade is written. But definitely, you cannot touch your grades. Because grades, usually denoted through numbers, are realities that only exist in our minds. We cannot touch grades. Again, we can touch the paper or the ink, where our grades were written. But we cannot touch grades. Therefore, a grade should be a variable. Section A, Section B. Whenever we say Section A, we are pertaining to this group of students in that particular section. Can you touch those students in that particular section? Yes. For Section A, for Section B, therefore, since we could touch them, it is easy to identify that we are pertaining to groups in this case. Strength. Can you touch strength? Can you touch power? No. We cannot touch this. Therefore, this could be our variables.